Hello, I'm Mike N1CC, and welcome to this overview of our research into human performance in Morse code acquisition. Human performance in the acquisition of Morse code varies widely. It's rooted both in the individual cognitive differences and in training methodology. In our previous video, we explored the research that led to the development of the LICW teaching methods. In this presentation, we'll go a step further and we'll examine the key differences in how humans acquire Morse code proficiency and why no two learners advance at the same pace. This knowledge is especially valuable for new students. By understanding that differences in performance are expected, that timelines naturally vary, and that proven strategies exist to accelerate progress, beginners should gain confidence and patience. Let's begin with the historical document that had the greatest influence on the development of the LICW teaching methods, the 1936 report by Ludwig Koch of Leipzig, Germany. The central theme of Koch's report was that Morse code should be learned as total acoustic patterns and not by visual reference to a chart. In other words, the sounds must be absorbed as complete auditory units, what he called gestalt, rather than broken down into dots and dashes. Koch also experimented extensively with character speed, devoting nearly a third of his report to that subject. He discovered that characters must be sent at a minimum of 10 words a minute in order to be perceived as unified sound patterns. Below that speed, learners tend to revert to counting dits and das instead of hearing the character as a whole. It's worth remembering that prior to 1993, the FCC required aspiring radio amateurs to pass a 5-word per minute Morse code test to qualify for a novice license. And at that speed, characters are too slow to be perceived as total acoustic patterns. Instead of hearing the letters as unified sounds, many students resorted to memorizing visual charts from A to Z and literally counting the dits and das in order to decode. By Koch's standards, this was the wrong approach, and yet, despite beginning with these poor methods, thousands of operators went on to achieve higher levels of proficiency. This suggests that success in Morse code acquisition can't be explained solely by curriculum or teaching methods. In 1919, psychologist L.L. Thurstone was the first to apply psychological testing to students of telegraphy. His findings were extraordinary for the time. He studied 165 men who had been drafted into the Army, coming from a wide variety of backgrounds: the mechanical and electrical trades, building and steel work, engineers, chemists, salesmen, and even bookkeepers. And what he discovered was surprising. There was no occupational difference in the ability to learn telegraphy. In other words, success in Morse code could not be predicted by career field, technical background, or prior trade skills. Thurstone also examined the role of education. His sample included men whose schooling ranged from high school dropouts to college grads, and the result? He found no correlation between the level of education and the ability to learn telegraphy. Thurstone also administered general intelligence tests to his group of telegraphy students. His conclusion was striking. He wrote, quote, "The general intelligence tests are not as valuable for diagnosing ability to learn telegraphy as for measuring general intelligence. Ability in telegraphy is probably a special ability," unquote. At the same time that Thurstone was conducting his studies in the United States, Otto Littmann was running his own teaching experiments in Berlin, Germany, and he later published his findings in an article in 1928. Now, the significance of Littmann's work is that he was the first to theorize that a student's early performance could predict their long-term success in learning Morse code. Lippmann suggested that observing how quickly and accurately a student learns their first few characters may serve as an indicator of how well they will progress through the entire code set. Koch also reached a similar conclusion. He wrote, quote, "We can consider the first 2 half-hours of the learning as a proficiency test." And what Koch meant was that the way a student performs during those initial lessons is highly predictive of their future success in Morse code. In 1943, Donald Taylor completed his doctoral thesis at Harvard focusing on Morse code instruction. And Taylor's work validated the earlier hypothesis of both Lippmann and Koch that a valid estimate of a person's ability to learn Morse code can be made on how quickly they learn the first few characters. In 1968, the U.S. Army conducted a detailed study of Morse code student performance, and what they found is still instructive today. On average, students required 55 hours of study to achieve proficiency at 12 words a minute. But the range was wide. The fastest learners achieved proficiency in as little as 18 hours, while the slowest needed twice the mean, up to 110 hours. But the important point is that they all achieved proficiency. The difference was simply in the time required to get there. To better understand why some students progress quickly while others take longer, we can look to Donald Taylor's 1943 doctoral thesis. Taylor concluded that differences in student performance hinge on 3 factors: aptitude, which is the natural ability of the individual to process and retain auditory patterns; the distribution and quality of practice, which is not just the number of hours invested, but how effectively those hours are structured; and finally, the degree of motivation, or the learner's personal drive and commitment to persist through difficulty. Together, these factors explain much of the variance in how long it takes students to reach proficiency. And importantly, while aptitude varies, practice habits and motivation are within the learner's control, meaning that progress is always possible with the right approach. So, can aptitude for learning Morse code be predicted? Well, the short answer is yes. Taylor's research concluded that certain traits strongly correlate with success. Students with musical talent and those who scored highly on the Seashore battery of tests, especially in the areas of pitch discrimination, rhythm, and tonal memory, tended to learn Morse code more quickly and effectively. And this makes sense, since Morse is fundamentally an auditory, rhythmic language. The ability to recognize patterns in pitch and rhythm give these learners a head start. We also know from modern teaching experience that younger learners, and particularly those under 18, are almost always successful. Their brains are more flexible and their ability to adapt to auditory symbolic systems is much stronger. So, what does all of this mean for LICW students? First, it's important to recognize that aptitude is not destiny. A student's natural ability may influence how much time is needed to reach proficiency, but it does not determine whether or not they will succeed. At LICW, we firmly believe that every student can learn Morse code, and that's why our curriculum is deliberately designed to accommodate a wide range of performance levels. The beginner's carousel is a perfect example. It allows students to progress at their own pace, circling back through material as often as needed until skills solidify. This flexibility ensures that no one is left behind, regardless of how quickly or slowly they advance. The key takeaway is that students should feel comfortable and supported no matter how long it takes to achieve their goals. Every learner's journey is valid, and every step forward is progress toward fluency. Another common trap for new students is assuming that past success in other areas of life, whether in education, business, athletics, or academics, will automatically translate into success in learning Morse code. The truth is, Morse is its own unique skill. It doesn't reward credentials, trophies, or prior achievements. Instead, it requires patience, consistent practice, and the willingness to embrace struggle along the way. When students carry over expectations from other areas, it can set them up for disappointment. They may expect rapid progress because they've excelled elsewhere, but when that doesn't happen, frustration builds and motivation begins to erode. The key message is this: Morse code is a fresh start for everyone. Regardless of background, everyone begins at the same place, and success comes not from prior accomplishments, but from persistence and smart training. So, what are some of the strategies to minimize the acquisition time? When it comes to reducing the time that it takes to acquire Morse code proficiency, the way we practice is just as important as how much we practice. First, optimize practice. Short, frequent sessions are far more effective than marathon efforts. This prevents fatigue, it keeps the brain fresh, and helps establish steady progress. Mixing both sending and receiving practice is essential. This dual reinforcement strengthens neural pathways and makes recognition and response more automatic. Second, emphasize flow over perfectionism. The goal is not to produce a flawless transcript, but to maintain forward momentum. Mistakes are part of the process. What matters is recovering instantly and staying in sync with the ongoing stream. Third, apply overlearned principles. That means practicing beyond initial mastery. Don't stop when something feels good enough. Keep working until the response becomes automatic. Practicing what you already know reduces time to recognize and builds stronger flow skills. So, for those who've completed Intermediate 1, Overlearn Bootcamp Immersion provides a proven accelerator with daily high-intensity flow drills which create rapid gains and can significantly shorten the timeline to conversational fluency. Fluency in Morse code doesn't come from memorizing characters in isolation. It comes from moving through a series of deliberate cognitive transitions. At LICW, we call this the path to Morse code fluency. Now, the journey begins with character recognition in BC1 and BC2, where students learn to identify the 44 basic characters. From there, we move into short word character flow, the exercises in BC2 and guided practice sessions. Here, learners stop hearing isolated letters and start experiencing them as short, meaningful words. Next comes flow skill development in Intermediate 1. This stage strengthens the ability to stay in the stream of code, to keep pace even when mistakes happen, and to begin copying with rhythm rather than hesitation. Once the flow skills are in place, Intermediate 2 focuses on increasing effective speed, and this includes reducing the time to recognize, mastering instant flow recovery, and developing character flow proficiency. Together, these tools expand a student's comprehension window. The next transition is Intermediate 3, where we move beyond word building into word discovery. Instead of assembling letters consciously into words, students begin to hear words as natural units, just like spoken language. And finally, in the advanced level, the learner reaches fluency, At this stage, code is no longer something to be decoded. It's simply understood as naturally as listening and responding in a conversation. One of the most important lessons for new students is learning to manage expectations. Performance in Morse code is not linear. Progress rarely looks like a steady upward climb. Instead, it comes in plateaus and leaps. There'll be long stretches where it feels like nothing is changing, followed by sudden breakthroughs when everything just clicks into place. And this is normal. It's how the brain consolidates new skills. But if students expect smooth, constant improvement, they can quickly become discouraged. Misaligned expectations are one of the biggest causes of frustration and sometimes dropouts. When learners believe they're stuck or not cut out for it, motivation erodes. But by understanding that uneven progress is the rule, not the exception, students can approach their practice with patience and persistence, trusting that each plateau is just a stepping stone to the next leap forward. We hope you now have a deeper understanding of human performance in the acquisition of Morse code. Progress will never look the same for everyone. Variations are natural. They're rooted in both cognitive differences and training methods. What matters is recognizing that differences are expected, timelines will vary, and proven strategies exist to help you move forward. With this awareness, you can approach your journey with confidence and patience. Instead of feeling lost or discouraged, you can see yourself on a well-traveled path, one that countless operators have walked before you, and know that with consistent, smart practice, fluency is within your reach. We wish you every success on your CW journey. 73.